talk,
piece,
and then you can do a more general introduction.
Okay, and then we'll get back to the exciting stuff. But I'm excited to welcome you to this program for Art in Motion, Kinetic Sculpture with Ivan Iler. This is our first full day open to the public, so welcome. You're some of the first in the room here. So this exhibition focuses on kinetic sculpture, and kinetic sculpture is very simple. It is sculpture that moves, art that moves. So kinetic means relating to motion. We have in this exhibit primarily featuring the work of Ivan Iler, whose work is here in the center and actually also out on our sculpture trail. We also have work coming from a call for submission we did, which Thom gratefully responded to. He'll share a little bit more about his work here. And a work from our permanent collection. So kinetic art, as a kind of fine arts movement, really started in the early 20th century, came out of an interest in technology and industrialization and how to incorporate that into art. So, you know, people have been making things that move for as long as people have been alive. But as we think about this particular movement, kind of first work that comes to mind, which I'm sure you can picture once I describe it, is one by Michel Duchamp, where he put a bicycle wheel onto a stool, and it became a work of art by spinning that wheel. Other kind of important artists in solidifying this movement include Alexander Calder, who we have here in our collection, best known for his mobiles, and those move from gravity and air and wind currents. So artists are really investigating different types of kind of influences that come into motion. Kinetic art allows artists to explore the impact of technology, play with time, right? So in artworks that move, time becomes a factor. Also mechanics and engineering. And then of course, artwork that requires you in order to be whole. So your engagement with it in order for it to happen. So in this exhibit, we're exploring a number of kind of interesting themes intersecting between kinetic sculpture and wildlife art. I'm going to draw our attention to one of Ivan Iler's works right here. And I actually would love for you to be my demo, if you wouldn't mind. So if you want to come to this side so you can see the work face on, feel free to move and get close. Just
I noticed it just in time.
One person to demo doesn't mean they have to be the only one. So let's watch closely as this work moves. So this is one of the first works of larger scale kinetic sculpture that Ivan Iler, our featured artist, made. Ivan Iler, before he started working in the visual arts, was a fabricator of motorcycles. He creates custom motorcycles, is a certified mechanic, and with every piece he really starts with motion. How does he want it to move and want it to work? And he finds a lot of inspiration in nature, where of course movement and lack of movement, stillness, is so integral to our experience with the natural world. So he thought, this work is called The Fox and the Hare, how interesting would it be to examine a chase between a predator and its prey? So as you see the work move, the chase goes on, it takes action. It's interesting to think about how we interpret that action. Do you feel that this is a moment of high tension? Or do you notice a sense of play between the animals as they engage in this chase? Can I get a hands up for tension? Okay. Hands up for play. All right, play is a more diminished part of the group, but still some playful action. Ivan Iler says that he likes to leave negative space in his works in order to leave room for your interpretation. So while the fox certainly does get a little closer to the hare in the movement here, he or she never really lessens that gap. There's always still a gap there. So we'll have to wonder, will this this predator-prey relationship ever really come to a head. So let's explore this idea of how a natural relationship can be better illustrated or visualized in kinetic art. We have this work here, and again, I'll ask for another volunteer, as this is a work that is best understood and activated with movement. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Perfect. So he's spinning the globe here, and if you like, you can also move this part of the work.
All parts of it.
And what about down on the support arm if you kind of give it a little push? Right here, perfect. And if we spin it at the same time. Ooh, I know. Well, you know, there's nothing a museum professional loves more than some slight trepidation when going to touch an artwork, right? But thank you, very well done. So this work is by a Brooklyn-based artist, Andrew Thompson. It's called Rainbow Trout and Green Drakes in Planetary Motion. So there are green drakes here on the globe, and then we have the rainbow trout rotating around it. Thompson was inspired by old planetary models, which maybe you can imagine in your head, right, where you kind of have the solar system visualized and you're able to put them in motion to show how that rotation works. So he's playing with that here and putting these two species, which have a predator-prey relationship as well, into connection. So, you know, this work has kind of a different sense of action than the other work, certainly, in terms of a chase. I'm curious for any thoughts or interest, perhaps, in touching it yourself. How did it feel to kind of put the relationship between those species into action?
Nice and smooth.
Nice and smooth. Would you perhaps contrast that, our other volunteer? How did it feel to initiate that chase?
A little clunky.
A little clunky. And I think that's the joy of the sort of diversity of kinetic sculpture that we have on view there, because these artists are working in different mediums, are trying to accomplish kind of different types of movement and feelings that you have when you engage with their work. Another interesting affordance of kinetic sculpture is to bring life to these wildlife subjects depicted. I'll draw your attention here to this mechanized flip book here. So this, if you see the work under glass, that means it doesn't need your touch in order to move. This, of course, is motorized. This is a work by Juan or J.C. Fonteneve, who's also based in New York, funnily enough. This is a work in our permanent collection. So the rest of this work are loans just brought in specially for this exhibit. We're really delighted to have a work of kinetic art in our permanent collection that we can display. So he came up with this idea for a mechanized flip book because he studied old clocks. He would go around to antique stores, buy clocks, and take them apart. So interested by how they worked. And so, you know, kind of using these mechanics that he was learning about, at the same time, he was really enjoying looking at 19th century natural history illustrations and textbooks to see how, you know, artists and scientists were depicting these species back then. So in creating this series of prints that he's mechanized of hummingbirds, he's drawing from these 19th century illustrations, giving life again to these species here. And to further explore this idea of life and death and how movement can, you know, either bring life or allow us to better examine this relationship, I'll pass it over to Thom again to talk about his work over here, Lord of the Flies. It's a great question, and one that I actually do not know the answer to, but you're not the only person with that question, so I'll track it down and let you know.
So it's fantastic to be here. Thank you to the museum for having me. It's lovely to be in Jackson. I live in San Francisco, even though I have a very un-San Franciscan accent. I've actually lived in the US for 27 years, so I'm kind of most of my adult life has been here. So I mostly, my degree is in jewelry, but if jewelry kind of sets up an image of people filing away at rings, the program that I did in London at Middlesex University was taught by a faculty who were part of the New Jewelry movement, which was in the 70s and 80s, especially in Holland and the UK. And it was working jewelry as sculpture, as object, as performance, as interactive pieces. For example, Julia Mannheim, who's one of my tutors, made a piece where it filled up a room like this, and it was almost like a built labyrinth. You started being able to walk in, and as you walked further and further in, it got tighter and tighter, so you had to squeeze yourself into the middle and then back out again. So these ideas of art that interacted with the body. For me, I've always been interested in nature. I grew up in the countryside, although I lived in London for 10 years before I moved to San Francisco. I've always been interested in animals. I feel much more affinity with animals than I do with people most of the time. And so they've mostly been, 99% of the subject of my work is animals. Increasingly, I've been interested in sort of the human world and our interaction with animals and the portrayal of sort of nature in cities. I've been a city person now for most of my life, and so although it is absolutely amazing to be here and see nature in nature, there is something amazing about opening your front door in San Francisco and seeing a coyote running up the middle of the road in the middle of the day. It's a very different experience. You know, it's just, or opening the back door and there's a raccoon staring in. And so that's something that's interested me. So forgive me if you heard me already, but I'll just do a quick explanation of this piece. Is that I was out with my dog and I saw I saw something on the sidewalk, on a wet black sidewalk, and it looked like somebody had dropped an emerald jewelry bracelet or something. And then as I got closer, I realized it was actually this hummingbird corpse that had been, I can't have been there that long. I mean, I think I did hear somebody say that there's so little actual material in a hummingbird that they disappear in, they're completely gone in days. I mean, there's not like months of decay, they're just gone. So this can't have been there very long. It was on a busy sidewalk and it was already covered in flies. So it had this sort of double sort of life in a way, because it was this incredible iridescence. And then as you got closer, you could see it was covered in flies, also iridescent. So it's this like iridescence on iridescence. And then you looked underneath and it was alive with maggots. And so I just thought it was just an interesting kind of conceptual thing for me to then turn that into a piece with movement, because it's this idea that it can exist as a standing sculpture, but it can also have this element of movement within it, which kind of conveys something of that idea of life and death and that cycle. So this had tons of different materials in it. So there's carved redwood. I live in San Francisco, so redwood is like a big building material. So my house is made of redwood. It's really easy to find redwood scrap. And so it's a fantastic material to carve. It's incredibly strong, but it's very light, but really nice to work with. And so the body and the head are made from carved redwood. The wings and the tail and the feathers are steel. I buy it, but I think it's, and the lily as well, and the leaves are the same steel. And I think it's used I don't know if they still do it, but I think they used to use it for dentists, that they would make, when they were making dental molds, they would use this steel shim around it. It's really easy to form, and they would sort of tape it together and then make molds for dentures and things with it. So I've got rolls of it, so it's great to work in. This is industrial steel wire, like you would see if you walk past the building site, you see they're tying rebar. This is that wire which I use. This is the main, actually, generally in my work, this is the main material that I use, and a lot of my work is basically three-dimensional drawings, very light. They're also about movement, but they don't move. And so, so they're very much about, looking at motion. I'm interested in the way that most of my work is very, just a few lines to suggest movement and form, texture, because I think as we experience animals, you're very lucky to sit there and see an animal in front of you that you can stare at and look at, unless it's gentle stuff. And so I like that experience of, often you only see a shadow of an animal, you'll see a flash of blue as a bluebird goes by, you'll hear a bird. There's all these different experiences that we have. You'll see the footprints, you'll see the dead one. We have all these different experiences of animals, I think, that are much beyond the kind of experience of seeing and then representing something that's kind of sat there in a very static way. So movement, I think, as an animal artist is a huge part of what we do. And then over the last couple of years, I've been working on actually physically putting movement into the pieces. And then the other thing I should say, so I've been making these kind of marionette type pieces, which this is one. And then what's interesting too, I think from my jewelry background, it's always, if you make a piece of jewelry, the idea is that the way that it connects to the body, everything is the piece. It's not a piece of sculpture that has a pin stuck on the back and you stick it on you, that it's a whole work of art where everything hopefully is resolved in a way. And so what has been interesting with making the marionettes is to think about, rather than having like a controller and then the string and then the thing, is that the controller, this part, actually becomes part of the sculpture. And if it's not physically part of the sculpture, that it's somehow aesthetically or thematically related to that. So this is like the first couple of pieces. I brought a video with me if anyone wants to see afterwards. Another fun dead bird puppet that I made. That was a dead raven that I saw. And I should say that that again, the way that the tendons had dried, it had only one leg, but it had its wings up. So it looked as if it was in some kind of amazing display, but it was just this, on the ground. I was out with a friend and I oh my God, this is so exciting. Like, why are you taking photographs of a partially decayed dead bird? But it was an amazing thing of seeing, just what the process of decay actually kind of brings life back to the piece. And so that was, again, something that I really wanted to make. Rather than a static piece, I felt like it was a piece that really needed to have movement in. So if you'd like to see, find me afterwards and I can show you a video. So the simplest movement with this is that this is a little bone, carved cow bone maggot in the middle, and you can just lift him and he comes up. The flies have their own little bit of movement. And so I wanted to have everything be dead. So the lily is dead, the bird is dead, the only thing that's alive are the flies.
And the maggots.
And it's on a marble base, which actually comes from a bathroom, but I also like the idea of, marble is also has a funerary association, so it's all kind of, it's there for a reason. And I could do that. I am not a puppeteer. I'm saying to Kelly that I have a friend who is a puppeteer, and when I see her use my work, it is amazing to see somebody who can actually do it. But this just means you can then have him. And then puppeteers will come in and use the strings and make him do different things. And so here we go. So you can also do both at the same time. And I don't know whether we can get we can also get really nice shadow. So then you can also have where you see the shadow or shadows. I'm sorry for those of you that have to look at me instead of that.
So Thom, while this is on display in this gallery, is it meant to be touched as you're touching it?
No. It's going to be under a vitrine. So there isn't actually a thing. So I have this friend who's watched this. It's really handy. There's a thing called a puppet knot, and it's this very simple knot that you use on a marionette. And I have actually put shellac on these to hold them in place. But it just means, especially if you're like in a puppet theatre and they're being used, they break. And so if you have like a really tough knot, so these actually, I'm not going to do it, but you can open them really easily. You can change it. You can take, so this is modular basically. So it's quite easy to take pieces off. It's done with tubes, so it's tube and then wires. So there's so in traditional puppetry, you're able to take them apart because they also do things where they change parts of them for humorous effect or whatever. So, but yes, so the movement is I say I'm not a puppeteer, so if you saw a puppeteer do it, they could do a much better job. So I just made the thing. And then the wings of the flies are paper which I stitched in and then drawn the Japanese mulberry paper that I've drawn into with India ink and then shellacked. and then all the finishes are, I tried to have either natural finishes, the natural finishes of the material, or like an iron paint. I think there's iron paint on these guys, or the natural metal, there's silver leaf, and then they also have like an iron paint. So it's like an acrylic paint, but it's really filled with iron. And so when you pick up the bottle, it's really heavy. And then you can see if you look inside the lily, I've done a rust treatment on that iron. So the piece is sealed, so the it's not going to rust away, but then you can get that effect of having the red of the iron. So if you have any questions while I'm here.
What is the title?
Oh, it's called Lord of the Flies.
Lord of the Flies.
Is it, silly question, was it a William Golding reference?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I know there is actually a new production of BBC adaptation of Lord of the Flies, which is equally as terrifying as the last one.
How important are materials to your practice?
But I mean, I come from a materials like craft background in effect, and so a lot of it in my degree program, a lot of it was like, if you're going to use like 8 different materials, how do you put those together in a convincing way? How do you join those things? How do you, all of that's super important. Like if you're trying to join plastic to gold, they have very different behavior, and you can't, like, once you put the plastic in, then you can't reheat the gold. And so there's like elements like with this where you don't, okay, now this is attached, and so you either have to do a really lot of pain in the ass to take it apart again, or you just, so you have to make sure, you know, the finishes are done, you join the disparate materials in a way where they maybe use similar finishes, but you bring them together so there's a unified language.
What did you do with the dead bird?
It's in a Tupperware in my studio. When you could have lifted with so much trepidation. Actually, so somebody years ago gave me they said, oh, I've got a coyote skull for you. I said, well, that's fantastic. And they bring it, and I open the shoebox, and it's not a skull, it's a head.
Oh my God.
Partially sort of mummified. And so it's in my, I mean, I had it for years in my studio. It's a really good barometer of how damp the day is, because if you open the door and it's damp out, you can really smell the coyote Sorry, that's a horrible anecdote. Enjoy your lunch, everyone.
Well, Tom will continue to hang around for questions, and he also has some videos of his other pieces if you're interested. Also, Ivan Iler, who's the featured artist in this exhibit, has 2 works out on the north end of our sculpture trail. You likely passed one of them on your way in today, the African elephant. There is also a unicorn a little bit further north, so I encourage you to explore. And finally, I hope you'll join me in acknowledging that the museum is located on the ancestral land of the Shoshone-Bannock and Eastern Shoshone peoples, with many others having historic ties to the region. Join us in acknowledging these indigenous communities, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. Our museum is committed to amplifying Native voices and increasing representation in our permanent collection. One more thing, if you would like to further extend your visit past asking questions of Tom and engaging with Ivan Iler sculptures on the sculpture trail, we do offer 10% off at our Cafe Palette for sneak peek program attendees. You just have to mention that you came to the program. Thanks. Thank you.